there. Good afternoon. This is Heather Klusendorf. I am head of the NYSED grades 3 through 8 ELA and Math computer-based testing program. Today's presentation is going to go over the same material that we shared throughout the state in 8 different locations from February 5th to February 15th, and also another show that we're having on March 8th. So this content is going to show you how to use the NextEra systems. And as a reminder, on Monday, March 4th, your students will be available in NextEra Admin if you ordered CBT this year for the spring administration for ELA. So first, we want to make sure that you know how to use the GoToWebinar feature. On the upper right, you will find a questions feature. If you chat questions at us, if you send us questions during the webinar, we will answer them. We'll try our hardest. Additionally, we turn the questions that you send to us and those answers, plus additional links and helpful resources, into a Q&A article on CBT support. For those who are not familiar with CBT support, that is our one-stop shop for all your CBT needs, and the URL is cbtsupport.nysed.gov. You want to look at it for the grades 3 through 8 ELA and Math CBT. And here you can see on the screen in front of us, this is the URL for where today's presentation can be found. Okay, so we always share all of our presentations for any training that we do, any helpful resources, so that you can take those presentations in PowerPoint, you can cut them up, you can use them yourself in your district. Okay. All right. So now, with further ado, we're going to get into the presentation. Okay. I'm going to talk a little bit about the NYSED CBT initiative, tell you some quick facts about CBT for those schools that are new this year, and then Helene Gagnatic from Questar is going to present most of the training material today. Okay. Next slide. The next slide. Yep. All right. So here we are. This is the 3rd year of operational CBT. Yay! We are so excited in New York State that every year the trend has been that more districts and more schools have signed up to administer computer-based testing. Okay. So the first year we had more than 4% of the state, 184 schools. The second year we had more than 15% of the state. That was last year. And this year we have more than 25% of the state that is participating in computer-based testing, including schools in most of the big 5 large districts, including New York City. Okay, so we expect that we could have more than 250,000 students testing on computers this spring. Next. Okay. For those that are visiting CBT support for the first time or not familiar, this is an example of the timelines. We put a lot of timelines out there. We post a lot of content. I like to write a lot. I like to talk a lot. Okay. So this timeline, we recommend that you print it and put it on your wall. And this is your go-to reference for what's happening with CBT on what day. As you can see up there at the top in the middle, March 4th, that's when we say that NextEra Admin students are loaded to NextEra Admin. And then if you look down below the primary timeline, you're going to find a special timeline just for student login tickets. Okay, so student login tickets, those are very important. And that's also the date when schools will be able to start setting not tested codes. This year for ELA, that is March 18th. Okay. Next slide. Every year for computer-based testing, we have had presence in every region in New York State. So here you can see we're tracking from 2017 to 2018, and every year each region has grown their CBT schools that are administering the computer-based tests. Your RIC, your Regional Information Center colleagues, their testing department, is your first tier support in the field for computer-based testing. They all have experience with CBT, directly helping schools and districts in their region, but not only that, they also participate in a RIC working group that we have had since 2017 to assist us with knowing what do our schools need out in the field to be able to transition more subjects and more grade levels to CBT? So if you don't know who your RIC testing department is, you can look on CBT support and search on the word RIC, and they have helpful emails that will help you contact them about CBT. Next slide. So here we have a few need-to-know details for those new schools. First of all, scratch paper is provided to all students testing on paper. We're still in the years of transition. For many of schools, we have more than 600 new schools this year to computer-based testing. For those schools, the students may still be very comfortable with scratch paper. So for ELA, students are provided with one piece of lined scratch paper. And for math, students are provided with one piece of unlined and one piece of graph. And if a student wants more scratch paper while they're taking the computer-based test, they simply hold up their hand and the proctor will give them another piece of scratch paper. Now, the proctor does not need to take that previous piece of scratch paper from the student. A student can acquire a whole mountain of scratch paper if that's what that student needs to be successful while taking the computer-based test. Okay, so, and then at the end, the scratch paper is just collected and destroyed. No need to send it back to Questar and treat it like a secure testing material. Student IEPs and 504 plans advise on testing accommodations in the computer-based testing platform. Okay, so they are set by session. They are set before the testing session, and they are set by subject for ELA and math. So if a student, for instance, has test read on their IEP, then the school must deliver that accommodation to a student. And a few slides from now, we'll be talking about the test read accommodation, the text-to-speech option, where the robots read to the student, or read aloud by human, where a human may be reading the test to the student, and the student will be responding online in the computer-based test. So we'll fully cover the accommodations later in this presentation. Not tested codes must be selected in Nextera admin for students not taking the computer-based test in a CBT grade level. So in most instances, all schools are going to have some students that are testing on paper. Maybe that's the best and most appropriate way to deliver the test read accommodation to a student. Maybe you have students who are testing on oral translations, such as for Turkish or Arabic students. Those students will be taking a paper test. There's no computer component for oral translation, for instance. So for any student who's taking a computer-based test, you will mark the student. Either the student is going to complete their test session on CBT, and you'll see that in Nextera admin, and Helene is going to show that to you. Or if the student is testing on paper, you will mark the student with a not tested code testing on paper, and we'll absolutely go over that as we go through this presentation. The proctor pin must be distributed to classrooms with the secure materials packet on the day of testing. The proctor pin, or you can think of it, the bathroom pass, allows a student to be able to take a break, right? They can pause the test. Maybe a student has an IEP, must take frequent breaks, or if a student needs to go to the bathroom. The student pauses the test, and then the proctor uses a pin to assist the student with getting back into the test. This is so important for our schools to know that we're going to go over it 3 times today. We're going to show you where to get that proctor pin. We're going to teach you some tips about why you need that proctor pin. And I know that all of our schools out there are going to make sure that those proctor pins are absolutely with those proctors on the day of a CBT test session. Okay. Access to student CRs, the constructed responses in session 2, are available online the first week of June for schools who have students who take the computer-based test. So you're familiar with paper testing. You guys have those, you guys get the paper test booklets back after scoring. Likewise, you will also have access to student CRs for the computer-based test. Next slide. So just so we know, April 1st is the first day of the ELA CBT administration. It's not an April Fool's joke, it's real. So April 1st is the first day that we'll see students testing throughout the state. You can see the calendar here. And just so you know, the makeup dates for CBT, a student who misses a test session can begin to take that makeup test session on the day after primary administration finishes for that grade level. The makeup dates that you see here, April 4th, they align with the paper-based testing makeup dates. But if you have a student who misses April 1st and April 2nd in third grade, but they're back to school on April 3rd, you can have that student start on session 1 on that day because the rest of the school has finished primary administration. Now, pro tip, if you have a student that just misses session 1 and comes back on the day 2 of the window that grade level is testing, session 2, that student who misses session 1 will test along with her peers on starting with session 2 the day she returns to school if that student only missed 1 day. Okay? You can write to us if you need clarification on that. And additionally, for those students that have that maybe they're making use of a test read paper booklet, you can open those paper test packets on April 1st, even though the PBT window begins on April 2nd. Clara DeSorbo posted a memo about that information last year, and you can find that on CBT support. We get asked that a lot. Okay. Next slide. Okay. And for CBT field testing, you get 3 weeks for field testing. It's low stakes. Grades, schools can schedule that at any time that's convenient with them within the 3-week window. Okay. So there are some similarities between operational and field testing. Same delivery system, right? So the secure browser is used for both of those administrations. Same username. Students use the nicest ID to access the computer-based test. The same test administration system. You're going to use Nextera Admin for both operational CBT and field testing. And we note this because we know that a lot of schools use the CBT field testing as that first opportunity for them to, dip their toe in the water for computer-based testing. So we want you to know what's the same, right? So we have the same technical requirements for devices and networks. There are 4 devices that are allowed in New York State: iPads, Mac computers or laptops, Windows machines, and Chromebooks. Okay, iPad minis, however, are not allowed in New York State for computer-based testing. And the same customer service contact information, you'll be calling Questar if you have an issue during operational CBT or you have a question. And we will always, we promote that phone number everywhere. It's in the teacher's directions, it's in the school administrator's manual, but also it's all over CBT support. Next slide. So for the operational tests only, we required technology readiness verification. Once a principal ordered CBT, the next day they received a welcome to Nextera email with information on how to verify technology readiness. All of our operational schools successfully verified operational readiness this year within the time frame. So yay! The constructed responses must be scored on computer. So when those students are entering their CRs, when they're typing them in, those CRs are delivered nightly to the ScorePoint system, which is the Questar product for scoring in New York State. There are 2 testing sessions. We don't call them booklets anymore. We call them sessions. So you have session 1 and session 2, and you can administer those testing sessions within a 6-day window, but they must be on consecutive days. So the rule is all students must test on computer in the grade level on consecutive days, with session 1 and session 2 happening on those consecutive days. Okay, but the 6-day window, you could test up to 3 grade levels with the same computers, right? You could test grade 3 on day 1, 2, grade 4 on day 4, 3, 4, etc. And there's the 3-day makeup window. Even though you can begin makeups as soon as that primary administration has finished in a grade level for computer-based testing, you still get those additional 3 days in addition to the 6 days for primary administration. Okay, so schools this year, they got to select their subject and grade level for operational CBT as within years past. Continue. Next slide. For the field test, we already noted that it's a low stakes. It's 1 session, approximately 40 minutes, very similar to the time frame that we provided for the CBT simulations that happened this week and are happening next Tuesday. If there are technical difficulties, we hope that the school works through it with Questar and with NICEAD, but they don't have to. But for operational CBT, if you encounter a technical issue, you do need to give us a call. You need to call Questar. You need to let us all help you work through that, because the students must complete the computer-based test for operational. Okay? And Questar scores all the response. Guess what? We're not scoring the students. We are scoring those test questions. And Questar handles all of that scoring. NICEAD assigns the subject and grade level for field testing. Guess what? It's always the same time every year. Every year in March, NICEAD sends letters to principals with their field testing subject and grade level. That's their assignment. We post them on the Office of State Assessment website, and we send information out via the CBT listserv every year in March. It's a repeatable process. Next slide. All right, folks. So now I'm going to step back, and Helene Gnyatek from Questar is going to take over. She is our program manager for New York State. She's been with us from the beginning, and some of you may know her because she's always out there in the field and with us on the training roadshows. So Helene, take it away.
Thanks, Heather. So my part today, we're going to go through the platforms that you will be using before, during, and after testing. We're going to walk through the technical requirements for those platforms. We're going to spend a little bit of time in the test delivery system, because we will spend a lot of time in the TDS when we do the Proctor webinar in March. We're going to spend the bulk of our time this afternoon in Nextera Admin. Okay, the 4 platforms that you will use for CBT this year. The first one is the Question Sampler. The Question Sampler is that web-based site that students can use to become familiar with the tools. There are practice forms in there. They're released items. And this is a good tool to use when you're first starting out to give the students a chance to practice with the tools and the new part of CBT. The test delivery system is also called, we also call it the secure browser, so you'll hear those names interchanged. The test delivery system is what the students use for operational and field testing. That's the application that is downloaded to the student's device prior to testing, and we'll go through that in just a minute. Nextera Admin is what you will use before, during, and after testing. This is your administration portal. This has all the student demographic information that you need for testing. This is where you print tickets and prepare for testing. ScorePoint, for those of you who are have set up a consortia and you will be scoring your own CRs, you will be using ScorePoint. I know many of you have a vendor scoring for this part of it, and if that's the case, you will not be using ScorePoint, but we'll spend just a little bit of time today going through ScorePoint. I want to show you some screens on what ScorePoint looks like. We will come back out in March, next month, to do road shows for specific ScorePoint training, so we'll not spend a lot of time today on that. The question sampler. The link here below the screenshot is for the question sampler. I assume by now you've all been there. You've used it for preparing this fall, probably, to get your students familiar with the tools. This is a great link to provide to parents when asking, what is this CBT all about, and what will it look like, and what will my students have to do? You can share this link with administrators, with parents, whoever wants to get a feel for what the engine is going to look like, what the students will be doing. There are multiple forms out there. They're all released items. Text-to-speech is available in English only, but text-to-speech as an accommodation is available. We also have in the question sampler empty response boxes that you can use with your own ELA and math items. What we heard from the field is we can only practice so long with the same questions, and we want our students to become familiar with how to type in the CR boxes, how to use the equation editor. So what we did is we created these empty boxes, and they're the last choice on the drop-down menu when you're on the question sampler. And these are for you to use in your classroom. If you have math items you want your students to practice with, they can do, daily math activities within the engine, so they can practice with the equation editor, with the drawing tool. And you can create your own items. So those are available in the question sampler and the question sampler only. They're not in the practice forms that are in the secure browser. The practice tests are the same forms that are in the question sampler are in the practice tests, which you can find within the secure browser, within the test delivery system. So the practice tests are just another way for students to practice. Within the secure browser, we require a login, so the NICES ID and the password. These are generic logins. For those of you who participated this week in the CBT simulation, this is what you used during the simulation this week. You used just sample logins, the generic usernames and passwords, and had your students practice within the secure browser. So this gives the students a chance to practice opening up the secure browser on their device, logging in, and running through those directions pages and what they'll see during operational testing. The link here shows when you open that has all the different usernames and passwords for all the different forms that are available. So we've made practice test forms for all the accommodations, for all ELA and math forms. Nextera Admin, again, is what you will use before, during, and after testing. It's role-based, so depending on what role you have in admin, you'll be able to see student information, print tickets, set up your class groupings, and we're going to spend a lot of time today in admin. The link here below the screenshot is the link to admin. The test delivery system, the secure browser. Again, this is what's installed on each student device. This allows for the student to log into the operational forms. They'll also use it for the field test if you're part of the CBT field test. When the students open up the test delivery system, all of the other applications and everything that may be on the student's device are locked down. Basically, when they're in the test delivery system, when they open that secure browser, everything else is locked down. If they want to get out, if they want to do something else, they have to actually log off of the secure browser in order to do anything else that's on their device. We'll talk about students saving their responses. If something happens, internet goes down, we'll talk about that in a few minutes. ScorePoint. Again, ScorePoint's a web-based application. The link here at the bottom of the page is here. The good thing about ScorePoint, everybody uses it. Scoring leaders, table leaders, the readers will use it. It's a pretty easy system. I just wanted to show you a couple of screenshots so you could see what those readers and leaders will be using when they are scoring the CR responses. So basically, as testing begins and we get closer to the scoring window, we will start feeding CR responses from Nextera into the ScorePoint application. And what you see here on your screen is a screenshot of what this reader will see. You'll see that on the right side of the screen is all the scores, the non-scores, sort of the actions that the reader will take. The middle of the screen is the actual student response that the reader is scoring at this moment. When you look right now, all you see is basically the student's CR box. So you don't see anything else around it. You just see what the student typed into the box. When you look at this screen, you'll see up here at the top this display item with the check mark in it. If a reader wants to see, okay, what was the student seeing when he responded? What was the question? What was sort of the background of it? If the reader clicks in that display item box at the top, then the actual question is provided to the reader. So now I can see, okay, well, there was a cube provided and a key provided, okay, and this is what the student responded. The readers always have this option to view the responses. So just as something if they have any questions about what the student actually saw. And then as they're going through, they can score, right? Assign the score if there's a reason a not score code needs to be applied. And then the reader can move and submit and move off to the next response. We spend a lot of time during the roadshow going through ScorePoint. It's a hands-on training, so we ask you to bring your device. We set you up with logins, and we spend a lot of time in ScorePoint. So I wanted to show you these slides just to get you excited about the upcoming ScorePoint Roadshow, where we'll spend a lot of time in there. Okay, let's talk about technical requirements. So the technical requirements, again, you should probably already know these because I expect you already have the secure browsers downloaded onto your students' devices because you've been practicing. Maybe you participated in the simulation. But just as a heads up, we are now supporting the iPad 12.1.1 version. So that's up to the latest one. I know there may be additional versions coming out, but right now 12.1.1 is the latest version that we support. And then all the other information here. Let's talk about some notes that I want to point out. For Chromebooks, we support Chromebooks within the kiosk mode. So you have to have them set up as the kiosk mode. We do this year, new, for Mac and Windows, we have the group installation files in admin under help downloads where you find the secure browsers to download. You'll find that now Mac and Windows has an additional file. If you're setting them up using group silent install or group install, these files that we have out there for you will help you. They're only needed for Mac and Windows. You know, if it's helpful for you, please use them. And just as a reminder, we don't use Java or Flash, so you don't have to worry about that. We ask you to whitelist our domains. We send you emails only when we have to. When we get into admin and you set up a new user, or we set up the users for you in the fall, we send you a welcome email with your password information. That information is kind of important. So you want to make sure that our domains are getting through your firewalls, your spam filters. I promise not to send you anything you don't need. So please whitelist our domains. Okay, we support touchscreens for the Chrome and the Windows 8 Plus and iPads, so you can use those if your students are used to using touchscreens. So touchscreen and styluses We support those. We do not want you to present those to the students for the first time when they sit down for an operational test. If they're used to using a touchscreen device, if they're used to using a stylus on their device, those are certainly tools that you can use during operational and field testing. But please don't introduce them on the first day if the student isn't used to using a touchscreen or used to using the stylus. Alternate language. For students who need an alternate language for the math assessments, they can use an alternate language keyboard if that's what they're used to using for their responses. I will tell you that students may not use a Chromebook if they need an alternate language keyboard, just because right now Chromebooks plus our secure browser plus that alternate language keyboard just don't work well together. So please make sure if the student needs an alternate language keyboard that you're using something besides a Chromebook, an iPad, or a Windows device. Keyboards and a mouse must be provided to students who are testing via CBT. A mouse, touchpad, or touchscreen must be available. So if the students have a touchpad or a touchscreen that they're used to using, that's fine. They don't. It's not required that they have a mouse, but one of those three need to be provided. We do not support dual monitors if you have your students' devices set up that way. Okay, let's move on. As part of the tech readiness that you needed to complete back November, December of last year, we provided some information to you. There was a system scan. It's out on our Questar main website. The link is here. It's under readiness. The system scan and the test readiness, those are just tools that you can use to prepare for testing. It's basically going to give you some information on, do you have enough bandwidth based on the number of students that you have testing, how many devices you have. So because you had to fill out your tech readiness already, I assume you've done this, but there's some information here if you haven't done it, or if you want to run these tests again as you get closer to operational testing this year. I will ask you that if you are going to run the system scan and you're checking on your bandwidth, please check your bandwidth at a time when students are actually in the school and maybe on devices hitting the internet. If you run this at Friday at 4 p.m., you're going to get a great result, but that's not an actual result of what may happen at 10 a.m. on a Tuesday when kids are actually in the building and are on the internet. So just keep that in mind. This was the tech readiness that everyone completed, and I know you did, because if you didn't, we came and asked you to please complete it. So that should look very familiar to all of you. Okay, let's talk a little bit about internet connections. In the perfect world, which we will have the perfect world this spring, in the perfect world, when the student is ready for testing, he has his login information, he logs into the test, and that is pinging the Questar server, and we download the test package to the student's device. And at that time, the student is just going through the screens, he's answering questions, he's on a roll. There's something called a heartbeat, and every few seconds, we will grab those student responses off his device, and we transfer them to the Questar server. So as the heartbeat happens, we're pulling those devices off we're pulling those responses off his device. He gets to the end of the test. He's answered all his questions. He submits the test. At that point, what Questar is doing is we're verifying that we have responses for all those questions. We give him a confirmation. Thank you, we have all your responses. And that's it. The test ends, we log him out of the test, life is good. There were no issues, internet was great. He tested, we have all his results. Everything is hearts and flowers, right? Let's talk about what happens if we got an internet issue during testing. The student needs an internet connection to log into the test. So, number one, if there's not an internet connection, something happened, he will not be able to get into the test. But in our scenario, there's an internet connection, it's good, student logs in, we download the test package to his device. He's going along and maybe he's answered 4 or 5 questions. That heartbeat happens, we take those responses off his device and upload them to the Questar server. Something happens, internet is lost. The student can continue to answer the questions. He can continue to go through the test. What is happening is because of that internet connection loss, I can't get to his responses. His responses still sit on his device. They will sit there until I can get them off. He continues to test. He gets to whatever, item 21, 22, and the internet comes back up. Internet is restored. I ping that student's device. I can get through, and I pull all of his responses for everything I missed while the internet was down. I pull those responses and I push them to the Questar server. He gets to the end of the test. He hits submit. Questar confirms, yes, we have all your responses. Everything is good. I log you off the test. So if there's an internet issue while the student is testing, have him continue to test. If there's a connection issue and it's restored before he gets to the end of the test, we just grab everything we didn't have before and life is good. What happens if the internet goes down and doesn't come back up before the student finishes, right? So again, has to have an internet connection to log in, or initially log in. But he does. The internet is up. I download the test package to the student's device. He's testing. Internet goes down. He can continue to test. But when he gets to the end, he wants to hit submit. He clicks submit. And I'm going to give him a warning that says, I don't have all of your devices. Okay? The secure browser actually pops up a warning that says, I don't have all your responses. Raise your hand, work with your teacher proctor. Okay? Those responses sit on the student's device until the internet connection is back up. Okay? As far as the student's concerned, for that moment, what's going to happen, he's going to see this warning. See this warning? Test not submitted, no internet. What we want is for the student to click the try again blue button on his warning box. Give it 30 seconds, see what happens. If it's, after 30 seconds, try again. If he still is getting this warning, then we'll have him log off, click sign off. Don't allow the student to go to another device. Right now, his responses are on that device. I want that student to come back to that device when the internet's back up. So we ask you to quarantine that device. Move that device out of the testing pool, right? Move it off, put a sticker on it, say this is Johnny's test. We need to fix it once the internet is back up. Okay. What the student is going to see while he is testing is in the top right corner of his secure browser. Do you see this green check mark? It's the green check mark of goodness. When he's testing and he's online, there's an internet connection. He'll see that green check mark. See that red X in the circle? That means for that instant, right, whenever that happens, is the internet is down. He is offline. This is more of a heads up for the active proctor in the room. As proctors, as administrators, I want you to tell the students, you keep testing. I'll worry about the internet, you keep testing. Okay? You don't worry about that, you can continue to test. I'll worry about the internet. At this point, if the proctor's walking around the room and maybe she sees one student or several students with this offline indicator, that's the proctor's warning that I got to get someone, a tech person, to look into the internet, see what might be causing this. Okay? So if your students raise their hand and mention this, just you keep testing, I'll worry about the internet. But that's what the students will see when they're testing. Okay, we just walked through this, but for example, Jane logs into the test, is actively testing, life is good, but something happens, the internet goes down, right? She gets to the submit page and she gets that yellow exclamation mark, the yellow, wait a minute box. She's going to wait 30 seconds and she's going to try to submit again. If for whatever reason the internet is still down and it won't let her submit, she logs out of the test delivery system. So she says exit now, gets out of it. You put that device off to the side. When the internet is back up, when you've got it fixed, you have that student come back to that device and she will log in. She will need the proctor password. We'll talk about that in a minute. She'll need the proctor password. She logs in. She goes to the review screen. She submits. She gets the green check mark of goodness that says we now have everything because there's an internet connection, and she's done. Once you do that with that device can now go back into circulation. So if you're using devices on multiple students for testing, that device is now unquarantined, if that's a word, and other students can use it. So once you get those responses off that device and you get that green check mark of goodness on the last page, then you're good. That device can be used again. Okay, let's talk about the test delivery system. We are going to spend just a little bit of time here because we have a proctor webinar in March, and we will be spending a lot of time in the test delivery system at that point. But there's a couple things I want to point out to you as administrators so that you can help your teachers and proctors identify these things prior to testing and then during testing. So for the test delivery system, the secure browser is downloaded to each device that you're going to use with students for testing. This is the icon they will see on their device once it's downloaded. This is what you're going to use for all practice, for operational, and for field testing. When the students click on that icon, they get the login. They have to use their nicest ID and their password. You'll get those out of admin. I'll show you where to get those in a little bit. And then once they log in with that information, they get this screen. It's a verification. Is this who you should be, right? Is this Helene? Here's what I want to tell you. There are some times when that information that's on this page here, if it's incorrect, student can keep testing, but there are times when we want that student to stop if the information is incorrect. So if the student's name is on that verification page, but it's spelled wrong. My name's Helene, there's an E on the end. If you spelled it with an E or no E and it just says Helen, well, I can still test. It may bother me that you forgot the E, but that is my test and I'm good. I can continue. If the date of birth is incorrect, I know the nicest ID is correct, the name is right, but the date of birth, maybe you shaved off a couple of years. That's fine. You know what? Tell the student they can continue to test. We'll fix that on the back end. We're going to fix it in the state database. We'll worry about that later. That's not for the student to worry about. So they can continue to test if their name is misspelled or they have the wrong date of birth. If the student notices that he has the incorrect grade on that verification page, if that verification page says that he is an 8th grader and he's actually a 6th grader, that's an issue because we are going to feed him an 8th grade test, which he's not going to appreciate if he's a 6th grader. So if the grade is wrong, stop testing immediately. If by chance the student's name is completely wrong, I'm Helene Gnyatek. If that name that pops up there is Heather Klusendorf, I'm going to take Heather's test, and she's not going to appreciate it. So incorrect grade or wrong student name, stop what you're doing. Verify that the student has the right ticket. So maybe in passing out login tickets, you just switched them, right? You gave Helene Heather's, and Heather probably has Helene's. So just make sure that the login ticket is correct. If it is and there's still an issue, you need to call customer service and we'll figure that out. But those are the 2 reasons why you would stop students from going any further. At this point, once they verify, they get to this page and they choose their session. Okay? When you click on Start Test, either Session 1 or Session 2, this is when the test package is downloaded to the student's device. When we talk about the load on your bandwidth, right, the hit to your bandwidth, and we talk about best practices, having students stagger the login, this is where we're talking about it. Right here, when they click Start Test, this is the hit to your bandwidth. So when we say, have, maybe the first 10 students click Start Test, then the next, wait 20, 30 seconds, then the next 10 students. This is where we mean for that to happen, because this is where all of that test package is downloaded to the student's device. And then they get a whole bunch of directions. These are the same directions the students see when they take a question sampler, when they're in the practice forms in the secure browser. Okay, so these will be very familiar because you have walked through these things with the student. They've practiced with the forms. They know what they're doing. I want to point out one thing on this screen. For ELA, we have the split screen because the passage is on the left and the questions are on the right. You'll see that there are 2 sets of arrows. Right? There are arrows that are in between that split screen, and then up here at the top, you'll see the arrows here as well. They look very similar. What I want to tell you is these arrows up here on top are to move to the different questions, right? You move the right arrow, you're going further into the test. The left arrow, you're going back into questions. The arrows that are in that split screen are to move the split screen from one side to the other. So to expand or contract that split screen. So I know they look similar, but they actually do separate things. So you might want to just call that out to your students who are testing on ELA. Maybe have them play around with that in the question sampler so they know which arrows to use. And they're still getting more directions on how to use the tools. Once they get through all those directions, this is where they need to input the access code. The access code is the code students always need to get into every session. It's a 4-digit code. We'll show you where to find it in admin, but this is where the students input that code right there. It's a 4-digit code. You'll, as proctors, you will provide that to the students. They'll hit continue, and then they sort of get this pause thing here. This is just to make sure all students have logged in, they have the access code right, they're ready to go. Once they click on Start Test, the first page is going to pop up. They're in the test. So this is just sort of a pause. Are we all ready? Once they click on Start Test, then they're in the test. This is a very nice graphic of just what we went through. Again, the Choose Your Test screen, that's where the test package is downloaded. That's when we talk about staggering. That's when you want to do it. So when the students click Start Test, first thing they see is a cover page, looks like the test booklet. They're getting into the questions now, right? So there's the status indicator. He's online. If they ever need to see those directions again, they can click on that and it opens up the directions. They can always go to the review page by clicking the review button, and they move through the test as needed. These are the tools that are available to every student for ELA and for math. New this year, we've added the line reader as a tool for all for the math tests. Last year, we just had line reader for ELA, and we heard from the field, you know what, the students could use it in the math forms as well. So we're adding that tool for math forms this year. Students taking the math test will also have calculators available within the secure browser. They also have calculators that you provide, hard copy calculators, real calculators. The equation editors, they are by grade band. So grades 3 and 4 have some tools, 5 and 6 have a little bit more, and 7 and 8 have a whole bunch. Those are the same as last year, so those should be familiar to you. The drawing tool is new for operational this year. We had the drawing tool in the field test forms last year. This year it's for operational as well. You'll see the drawing tool icon on the equation editor bar. Once you click that, you'll get the additional box that pops up. Students can respond to any math question using the keyboard, using the equation editor tools, so all these symbols, or they can use the drawing tool. The drawing tool is not required for students to respond to math items. It's just another tool for students. They can use whatever they want to respond to the item. If they want to write it out in text, that is fine. If they want to do a combination of two or all three, that is fine. Okay? So whatever lets the student respond to the question and whatever he's comfortable with, that's what he can use. But the drawing tool will be available in all of the CR boxes for all grade levels of math. And then once he gets to the submit page, or the review page, you'll see these. I want to call out one thing. You see the highlighted. So on here, the bookmarks is highlighted. Whatever the student clicks on, so if he clicks on unanswered or answered or bookmarks, that's what's going to highlight for him. So all of these are the test questions. If he clicks on bookmarks, all of the questions that he has highlighted, that he has bookmarked. I want to go back to that. I'm not sure about that. That's what's going to be highlighted. You'll see on the screenshot underneath, the student has highlighted the unanswered. When that happens, then he can see, oh, yikes, I got a couple of questions that I haven't answered. You'll see 43A and 43B. That means that there are multiple CR boxes for that question. Question 43 has 2 CR boxes. He didn't put anything in either of them. So just as a reminder, that's what those highlights mean, and the student can manipulate those to see what he needs to go back to. When he's done, he will click on the submit test. It's going to give him a warning, but students may submit the test without answering all the questions. At this point, proctors may prompt the student, you have one unanswered question. Is that really how you want to submit? And that's it, right? So the proctor can verify with the student, you are leaving a question unanswered. You haven't answered that. If he decides to click submit test, then he's done. He gets the green check mark of goodness, and he can sign out and be done for the day. For students who need to pause a test for whatever reason, I need to go to the restroom, he's a slow tester, you knew he was going to need additional time, you're going to move him to the office or a separate room so he can continue. If he pauses his test at any point during his active testing, when he gets back in, he logs back into the test, he is going to need a proctor pin. So when he pauses a test, he will need the proctor pin. That's a good way to remember it. The proctor pin is an 8-digit code. I'll show you where to find it in admin. But he will need that every time he gets back into that session. Remember, the first time he logs in, he needs the access code. If he pauses, he needs the proctor pin. And this is just a lovely graphic on when he will need the proctor pin. So if the student pauses and comes back in, he's going to need his proctor pin and then the access code, and then he can continue to test. Okay, we talked about this. The proctor pin is in admin. I will show you where it is in just a minute. The proctor pin is by school. There is one proctor pin per school. You can change the proctor pin if it becomes compromised, right? It's a secure material. You do not provide the proctor pin to students. But if something happens, you think maybe it was left on a teacher's desk or maybe a student saw it, you can change it. In admin, at the very bottom of the home page, you'll find the proctor pins for each school. If you click on the blue font of the actual proctor pin numbers and letters, it will pop up a box and you can change the proctor pin. Okay? So just in case it needs to be reset for whatever reason. The proctor pin is the same by school, so one per school. It will be the same for ELA and math. So for those CBT schools who are administering both ELA and math, my recommendation would be when you're done with ELA, before math starts, just go in and change the proctor pin. That way, just for whatever reason, it's a different code. It's a different code for the math administration. Just good testing process. Okay, let's get into admin. I had mentioned that admin is a role-based system. So depending on your role in admin, you could see a lot of information or not a lot of information. If you're a teacher, you're only going to see your students that are tied to your account and the class groupings that are tied to your name. On the other hand, if you're a RIC user, you see everything within your region. So for all of your districts that are under the RIC user, you can see all students, all student demographic information. You can make changes to student demographic information. So we'll talk through that, but no, it just depends on your user role. Will depend on what you can do in admin. So teachers can see their students. They can't make any edits to student demographics. If a teacher notices that maybe the student's date of birth is wrong or student's name is misspelled, teacher is going to have to work with a school level person or a district level person to get that changed in admin. Teacher roles can access their class groupings that they're tied to. We'll talk about that in just a minute. They can also print login tickets for their class groupings. Teacher is a role that if you want your teachers in admin, you can set them up. But really, think about how you want to handle this and what your process will be for all of getting those login tickets printed and distributed. Maybe just the school test coordinator or the principal is going to handle that and hand those out to the teachers. Maybe you're going to have sort of the war room control center module where you will handle at the school level all that sort of admin technical stuff and just let the teachers deal with proctoring on day of testing. You'll hand everything to the teacher. They don't have to be an admin. So it's a local decision on whether or not you add teachers into admin. That's up to you. But there is a role out there for them, and they can get into admin. There are 4 types of school level users: the school test coordinator, the principal, and the building level user. All have the same access in admin. They can do the same things in admin. You, at the local level, determine who's doing what at your school, but those 3 users have the same access. The school information technology coordinator, they have limited access. This may be the tech person who's going to set up your devices. The school information technology coordinator is the one who has access to, only has access to the downloads page, right? I need that person to get to the download page, to get to the secure browsers, to get my devices set up. So they can't see student information. They can't edit student information. They have a limited role. Again, you don't have to have an SITC. It's just a role that's available to you. And it works the same way at the district level. The DTC, the superintendent, and any district level users you set up, have the same roles. That DITC, that District Information Technology Coordinator, only has access to the Help tab to download secure browsers. So you set users up as you need to, whatever works best for you. As I mentioned, the RIC users have access to everything under their region. So your RIC is your first line of defense if you have any questions about admin, setting up secure browsers, anything you may have. Your RIC, if you have questions about admin, call your RIC. They can log in, look at your district, find maybe the student that you have questions about, and walk through the system with you. Right? I can't remember what Helene said about setting accommodations. Call your RIC, they can log in, they're stepping you page by page how to do that. So RIC has access to everything in the districts and schools. We do have the ability in admin to have dual user roles for one person. Think about how you want to do that. It's a hierarchy role. So if you are a district level user or a DTC, you don't need to set yourself up as a school test coordinator. You have access to everything at that district, including everything at that school. So think about why you would want to set up a user with dual roles, just because I don't want you all have to do extra work if you don't need to. So it's available. It's an option in admin. As you're adding roles, you can have multiple roles here. That's fine. But however you want to handle it, it's a local decision. For some roles, there can only be one. There can only be one DTC, one superintendent, one school test coordinator, and one principal. So You can only have one role or one user set up for each of these four. You can set up as many district level users as you want. So the ones down below, district level user, your DITC, your building level user, your SITC, and teachers, you can have multiple people be set up as these. So if you're the DTC, but you've got two helpers who are going to do everything with you, set them up as DLUs. They have the same access as the DTC. They can help you during testing. So just keep that in mind when you're setting up roles. Just as a reminder, for setting up student accommodations for CBT, only district level users and school level users can set those codes. Teacher users cannot set student testing accommodations. Who does that is up to you. It's a local decision who sets those codes, but just know teachers can't do that. Same thing with not tested codes. District users and school level users can set those codes. Teachers cannot. Okay, getting into admin. We uploaded an organizational file that we received from NICEAD back in the fall, and we loaded all the DTCs and the principals into admin. You should have received a welcome email months ago. Anytime a new user is set up in admin, they get the welcome to Nextera email. And so once you get that, it has the link to admin, it has your username, and it also has a temporary password that you will have to change the very first time you get into admin. We set up DTCs and principals, and by now I'm thinking that you've probably set up some additional users in there as well. This is the home screen. Everybody who logs into admin will see this screen. Depending on your role, it may be a little different. You may see a little bit of different information, but basically this is the home screen that you land on. For right now, if you logged into admin, you would not see the Students tab across here, this blue bar here. You would not see the Students tab, the Classes, or the Tests tab. We haven't opened those up yet. There's nothing in there for you to look at. So those will open as we get closer to testing. Here on the home page, if you scroll down below all of this text here, you would find the proctor pin. You will notice it is not on the screen when you first log in. You have to scroll to the bottom. It's a security measure. We don't want that proctor pin just popping up because it is a secure material. So if you scroll down to the bottom of this home page, you'll find the proctor pin. Let me go back. See this very top where it says 2019 Spring 3 through 8 QAI Training District. That's sort of the top menu. If as a district user or a RIC user, if you need to change that, you would just click on that little change button up there and it pops down this menu, and you would choose if maybe at a district level you just want to see your certain school information. You would choose it here and then click on change. So that's how you change to look. It's also, you will use this for your schools who are doing both ELA and math. You will have to choose your content area. So it will have ELA and math there, and you can toggle between the two. As you get closer to math, maybe you're testing ELA and getting ready for math. That will be where you change that view. And I already told you, proctor pin's at the bottom. I told you we were going to talk about the proctor pin a lot today, right? Heather mentioned that. Proctor pin is at the very bottom of that home screen. You'll find it for each school. When you're in the accounts page, so the accounts tab on that blue bar on the home screen, you will set up your additional users there. So you can create your new accounts, you edit an account if maybe an email was wrong. If by chance someone forgot their password because they haven't been in admin for a while, you can reset it from that accounts page as well. When you set up accounts, here's just some information on the length and what's required of the password. We send you a temporary password, and the very first time you log in, you have to change it. We've got some requirements, and it will remind you of those requirements if you fail to follow them. So not to worry there. The user ID field is always the user's email address. So when you're setting up new users, please always use their email address. It's called user ID field, so just as a heads up. So on the page, when you click on accounts across that blue tab, you're going to see all the accounts that you can based on your role, right? So at a district level, you would see all district users. If you're a principal, you're only going to see your users in your school. If you want to view the details of that user, you would click on the blue view, or you could reset a user by clicking on the reset. Once you're in that user's account, you will see that you can edit. You have to click the edit box first to make any changes. And then you're going to get all the information. If by chance you decide you want to add additional roles to the user, he's set up as a principal, but he's going to help me at the district level, so I need to add him as a DLU. This is where you would do it. You would select the additional role type on the left from the drop down, and then click on Add Role, and it'll pop on the right side under Selected Roles. You'll notice that this red box where it says this account is currently active, and there's a check mark in there. If you have a user that may be set up an admin and doesn't need to be an admin anymore, maybe you had a teacher that you set up and she's no longer at the building, or a principal has left, if you come into their account and you get rid of that check mark, just unclick or click on the box and the check mark goes away and you save it, that user's account is now inactive and their password will not work. So it's a good way just to sort of clean up if you've got users in admin that don't need to be there anymore. So just a helpful tip. We talked about this when adding additional roles. You'll run through this. Same screen. If you need to set up a new user, you would come back out to the main page with all the users and click on New Account. And then it's going to pop up and you have to put in all the new information. Remember, the username here on the right is their email. And when you're setting up a teacher is required, when you're setting up teacher accounts are required to have the teacher's ID. This doesn't have to be their official legal teacher ID. It just has to be something unique to your school. So whatever you want to put in here, it just has to be unique to your school, and we require that to be there for teacher accounts when setting up teacher accounts. And then you would click on Create an Account here at the bottom. And once you do that, then the Welcome to Nextera email will be sent to that teacher or new user. Okay, let's go through classes. Classes for CBT are the groupings that you will use for CBT only. Class groupings here in Nextera have nothing to do with final reporting. It is not how the students will be in groupings for reporting. It is solely for CBT. They don't have to align to class or instructional classes in your building. So think about what works best for you for these classes. Know that when we receive the pre-ID file of all the student demographic information, when we receive that from the state, we created one class grouping by grade and content area. So when you have access next week for ELA, when you have access into admin, you will see the classes and you will see that we put all third graders in one big class group. We put all fourth graders in one big class group. You decide what works best for you and your school, if you want to leave them like that, or you want to create classes by some other grouping. If you want to create individual teacher classes, that's fine. Think about how you're going to manage it during testing. So classes is how, the groupings is how you print tickets. If you create 20 different classes for your third graders, when you go to print tickets, you have to go into each one of those classes to print tickets. When you're viewing, when you're just monitoring testing on testing days, you will have to monitor those classes individually. If you keep it as one big class, one big group that is in there starting next week, you would print tickets for all your third graders under that one big class. You would monitor all your third grade students while they're testing under that one big class. Okay? We're going to show you how to set up classes, but if you want to keep just that one big grouping that we created, then you don't have to worry about setting up additional classes. But again, it's a local decision. You decide what works best for you. The Classes tab, when it's available, starting next week, you'll see it in admin. When you click on it, you will see all the classes that are set up for your school. If you want to view that class, see what students are in that class, you click on the View button. You can delete a class that you created. You can only delete a class if there are no students in that class. So say you you thought you were going to do individual teacher groupings, so you created a couple classes and then you talked about it with your staff and said, no, we're not going to do that. Well, as long as you don't have any students in there, you can go in and delete the class. The delete icon is only going to show up if there are no students in there. Okay, so it's not even an option if students are tied to that class. When you click on the View button for that specific class, you're going to see all the students who are tied to that class, so in that class grouping. You can edit that class grouping by adding students in, moving students out. I'll show you that in a minute. What I want to show you right now is this download students in this class. See this Excel, it's blue font. This is going to be your friend prior to testing. Okay? If you click on this Excel, it is going to download an Excel report. You are going to open it up and it looks like this. This is by class. So you can run this by class. It will show you all the students that are tied to that class and their accommodations that you have set up in admin. This is a required step when you are setting up for testing. Run this report. Make sure you see all your students. I'm expecting to see these 5 students in this class. And yes, the accommodations are set up correctly. Run this report a few days before the testing window opens. Run this report before you print tickets. Once you print tickets, if you have to go in and change an accommodation, it may change the login information. Because if I have to push a specific form because the student now needs text to speech and he wasn't set up for it, that may change it will change his login information. So maybe the week before the window opens, run this report a couple times. Make sure that for the class grouping, you've got all the students in there and their accommodations are set. And I'll show you how to set accommodations in just a couple minutes. But run this report. It's your friend. Use it. To edit the class, you would click on Edit, and then it's going to pull up all the students that are already in the class. And if there were any students who were not assigned to a class, they would be on this left side. And then you use these middle these middle arrows to go back and forth. So you add a student, you remove a student from this class. Okay? So this is where you would do it from. The teacher is tied to this class, the class name. You can add a proctor name if you want to. That's only for your information in admin. That's not something that we send back to the state or anything. That's not for reporting or anything. It's just for testing. Make sure you click on the Save button when you're done, and then you have edited that class. From this classes page, when you're looking at the details for a specific class, so you chose the class, now you're looking at all those students who are tied to that class. If you click on this View button here for an individual student, when you click on that, that actually takes you into the Students tab of Admin and is going to open up that student demographic page. From there, you can set accommodation codes, verify their demographics are correct. So just know if you click View here, it's going to take you into the Students tab. That is where we will segue into the Students section of Admin. Okay, I mentioned this. We have received the student enrollment file for ELA from NICED. We are loading it now. We received the NICES ID and the grade level. We received the first name and last name for the student and the date of birth. So we are in the process right now of loading all those students for ELA into Admin. I mentioned that those students are loaded as one big class grouping by grade. You'll know that it is our created class grouping because for the class names, we use the district plus the school name, and the teacher name is the placeholder as well. So you'll know it's ours that we set it up because it looks a little weird, but that's our way of tying all those students to that class and to that teacher. So we've created dummy teachers tied to that class. Those are going to be loaded. You're going to have access to those next week. You can verify all that at that point. If you want to move them into different class groupings, that's up to you. You do that. We are going to have the students loaded in admin next week. They will be loaded starting on Monday. NICED is not going to communicate that to the field probably until Wednesday, solely because Tuesday is the CBT simulation, the next simulation. And you do not need to be an admin for the simulation. Remember, the simulation uses those practice tests. You don't have to be an admin to do anything for the simulation. So because the simulation is on Tuesday, you'll get the official notification that the Students tab is open in admin on Wednesday. But just know next week they'll be available. Once they're available, you will see them under the Students tab. So you will have access to the Students tab and the Classes tab next week. That way you can verify that we have all your students. I realize that there's a lot of movement within your schools and in your districts. And we got a snapshot as of February, mid-February. So there may be some changes that you'll have to maybe add some students into admin. So starting next week, you can do that. You can also, starting next week, set your accommodation codes for students who need accommodations. Once you click on a student, you want to view that student, you'll see that the accommodation codes are there. You would click on Edit for the student, and then you would choose the accommodations that the student needs for testing. I want to point out one thing on the next page. For students who need an alternate language for math, so they're going to take a math test, but they need it in Spanish, I need you to code two different pieces in admin. I need you to tell me first, that the student needs a testing language other than English. So in this drop down, I need you to choose the language. And I also need you to tell me that they need the testing language accommodation. So for testing language, it's a two-step process. All the other accommodations, if you just click on initial page Zoom or answer masking tool, that's all you need to do. You click on that, you save it, and the accommodation is set. But for alternate language for math, I need you to tell me he needs the accommodation, and I need you to tell me what flavor of a language he needs. He needs Spanish, he needs Russian, whatever it is. Let's talk a little bit about online accommodations. There are two types of accommodations that you have to code for your students for CBT. The online testing accommodations are those accommodations that Questar will provide to the student during testing. You code the student for these accommodations, and I will provide those accommodations when he logs into the test. Okay? He needs a background color. Then you're going to tell me what background color. He needs text-to-speech. I provide the text-to-speech player. Okay? Online testing accommodations, you code the student. Questar provides those to the student. As opposed to classroom accommodations are those accommodations that you at the school will provide to the student. You need to code them because NICED needs that information, but you are providing those. So you may code the student for ELA and math flexibility and scheduling. You code that, you provide that flexibility for what the scheduling. He needs to test over multiple days, or he needs to be tested in a separate location. He can't be with all the other kids. You provide that accommodation, you set that accommodation so that I can record it for NICED, but you provide these classroom accommodations. Both of them, I need you to code in admin. There is the ability to edit multiple students at one time. It's a great edit. If you have multiple students who need text-to-speech, it's a great tool to use to add all the text-to-speech codes. I will warn you that the multi-student edit is an override and not an addition. What that means is if you come in here and you add text-to-speech for all your students, well, if it just so happened that student 3 was also already coded for reverse contrast and you didn't choose that during your multiple student edit, you have now wiped that out for student 3. So just think of it as it overrides what is already there for the student accommodations. It does not add to what is already there for accommodations. Okay? Keep that in mind. Let's quickly go through accommodations. The answer masking tool, this is an accommodation. This is different than the answer eliminator tool. The answer eliminator tool, that red X that the students use to cross out, maybe B, I know B is not right, I'm going to cross it out. Answer eliminator tool is available to all students. Answer masking tool is an accommodation for those students who need the less distractions, right? When he logs into the test, every multiple choice item that he moves to will have all the multiple choice distractors covered. He clicks on the little eye icon, it uncovers them, he can close it back up. They will always look like this. They always are covered when he moves to the next question. Multiple choice question. Background color, you choose the background color for the student. You tell me what color, he needs green. When he logs into the test, the background will always be green. No matter what question he's on, it will always have a green background. Same thing with reverse contrast. You code reverse contrast, student logs in, he will always see black background, white font for every question that he moves to. Initial page zoom is a little different. When you code initial page zoom, you are saying when the student logs in, I want his test to be zoomed to 150%. Student logs into the test, it's set at 150%. He's moving through the test. Now remember, there is a zoom tool provided to all students. The zoom tool is a tool for all. Initial page zoom is an accommodation for those students that you want in their IEP says, I need it to be at 150 at all times. When he's in the test, he can use the zoom tool to change that zoom percentage. He may get to a question and say, I just need to see more of this on the page. I don't want it at 100% or 150%. I want it at 100%. He chooses to decrease the zoom. When he moves to the next question, it is going to stay at 100%. It is going to stay at what the student changed the previous question to. Okay? This is initial page zoom. This is when he logs in, that initial page is set to X. He can always change it. And once he changes it, it stays to what he chose until he changes it again. Okay? So that one's a little different, and I wanted to point it out just so that you have a heads up and you can practice that with the students who need that accommodation. Text-to-speech is another accommodation. The player, when the student is coded for text-to-speech, the player down here, this black bar here, shows up for all questions. The student can play these little lines right here are sort of the menu. He can click on that and play from all or play the question, those types of things. Text-to-speech, the student should be practicing with text-to-speech now in the secure browser or in the question sampler so he knows how to use the tool. The student can do the play from here. The play from here is actually not on this black bar. It's actually, he uses it through the mouse. And wherever the student wants to play from here, he'd put his mouse there and then he would right click. And the little menu that says play from here will pop up. He clicks on that and then the reader will play from that spot. So play from here is the only one that actually isn't on this black bar. The last accommodation is read aloud by human. The read aloud by human is a CBT online accommodation. This accommodation says the student is going to take the test on the computer, but there is a proctor who has the same form Form A, that is sitting next to him, and could be that proctor is reading the test to the student. Proctor's using her hard copy, she'll have Form A. The student is coded for read aloud in the accommodations, so we force him to have Form A. She's reading on paper, he's responding on the computer. Okay. That is different than text-to-speech or the read aloud paper only, or the test read paper only. These are the three sort of reading accommodations. There's test read on paper only. That's when the proctor and the student both have paper versions, and the student is actually taking the test on paper, does not have a computer anywhere. Proctor is reading off paper, student is responding on paper. The read aloud by human is that CBT accommodation. The proctor has a test booklet, hard copy. Student is responding on the computer. And then text to speech, student has his headphones. He's listening to the computer read to him. He doesn't have a proctor sitting next to him. And so those are the differences. Okay, the next tab we're going to talk about is the test tab. The test tab is where you're going to go to basically print tickets and monitor testing during the window. The test tab for ELA is going to be available on March 18th. That's important because on March 18th, you can start printing login tickets for your students. Testing does not start until April 1st. Once you print those tickets, they are secure materials, and now you have to keep them in a locked, secure area. So if you don't have to start printing on March 18th, then don't. Wait till you get closer to the window. They're just available starting on the 18th. And you are not printing tickets until you verify that all your accommodations are set correctly. So on the test tab, when you click on it, you're going to see all the different class groupings that you've set up. When you click on the view button, you're going to get the information for that class grouping. Okay? Here in the middle of the page, in this red box, big green arrow, that's where your session codes are. You can see that you can create a new access code if you want. You can reset it. That's up to you. It's a 4-digit number. Just keep it secure and keep it something the students won't know off the top of their head, right? This is a secure material, but this is where you get it off the test tab. What you also see on the test tab at the bottom are all the students that are in that class grouping. So you can monitor the testing here. You can see the 2 sessions. The student hasn't started, but once he does, you'll see the information. You'll see how many items he's completed, when he started the test, and when he has submitted the test. This is where you will, staying on this page, this is where you will print your login tickets. This is also the examiner view. We'll talk about that in just a minute, but this is where you would go to print the login tickets for that class grouping. You also can set your not tested codes from this page. So see the blue set font? You click on that and you can set your not tested codes for each student. And you're setting them, as you can see, by session. You have a session 1 not tested code and a session 2 not tested code. But to print tickets, when you click on the print tickets icon, you're going to get these drop down. You can choose to print them Avery style 5160 or 5163. You click OK, and it's going to create a PDF. Okay, and this is what the student login tickets look like. Not a lot of information, just the basics, just what they need to know. The access code is not on this ticket. That's something that the proctor will have and provide to the students. Okay, the examiner view, if you click on the examiner view, it's going to open up another tab that looks very similar to that page we were just on. But the examiner view is a restricted way or a restricted view for those people who don't have access to admin. So maybe you've got a visitor in your building during testing and they want to monitor testing, but you don't want them in the actual room while students are testing. You can open up this examiner view. You can log off to the other tab, where you're logged into admin. Now they have this examiner view. It refreshes every few minutes, but they can watch student status, okay? They can see the students. They'll see as they continue to work through the test, and this will refresh. It'll show the total number of questions they've answered. So just another way to possibly, if you've got a superintendent visiting or district person visiting that doesn't have access to admin, doesn't need to be an admin, they can view testing status. Not tested codes, I just talked about this. If you click on the blue font set, it pops up this box. You choose your not tested code. You can also set not tested codes from the testing status details page under the test tab. So see the blue not tested font or the in progress. If you click on that, it's going to open that set status code, the not tested code. You can set them from there, students not tested code from there. Testing status details page. This is a good place to just see overall testing status. This blue bar here in the middle with the red highlight around it. This is depending on the information, the filters that you put up above, you will see overall status. So if you're looking at it here, you'll see the filters are by the school, right? So I've chosen the school, I've chosen ELA, but I haven't chosen a class. This is actually going to show me all of the students in the school, the status. Okay, see this export button here down at the very bottom right corner? Remember that. I'm going to get to that in just a minute, but I want you to remember where you saw that. There are two reports that you will use during testing, preparing for testing and during testing. We talked about the first one, that student download report, right? The download report that we talked about from the classes page has all the students and their accommodations. You can also get to it from the student page. When you're under the student tab and you have the list of all your students, this same report can be downloaded from there. You'll see it says student download here where the arrow is. You can get it from there. It has the same information. This is the report you're going to run and verify prior to testing starting. Yes, I have all my students in the system. Yes, I have their accommodation code set up. That's the first report. And again, you can get it from the classes page as well, and it looks a little different. The link says download students in this class. It's the same information. The headers may be slightly different, but it has the same information. The report that you want to run when testing is close to being done, but not completely done. You've gone through maybe the original testing dates. You're in the makeup testing dates now. You want to run this report. This is the export button from the testing status details page. You run this report. It is going to pull open or run a report for all the students and their status. Run this report during makeups and verify that you have all your students in a completed status for both sessions, or you have a not tested code set for why those students didn't test. Please do not run this report at 4 o'clock on the last day of the entire window. because if you find out that Billy never started session 2 because you forgot he was sick that day and you forgot to get him into the lab to finish, it is too late now because it's 4 o'clock, Billy's gone, and the window closes in about an hour. So run this report during testing. Verify that you've got all your students completed or the not tested code is set. It shows both. And then you're ready to go. It's a great verification for you during testing. Okay, on testing day, these are the things that you need. You need student login tickets, access code, the proctor pin. Remember, if they have to pause and get back in, they need the proctor pin. Scratch paper, teacher directions, which are now available on CBT support, as well as the OSA website. Those have been posted. They're also in admin under the help tab. They've been linked there. Students taking math will need the calculator and the math reference sheet. We still print and ship 2 copies of the math reference sheet for every student that needs one. It is available within the student engine, the test delivery engine, but we do send you hard copies as well. Okay, I'm going to tell you again, the access code is needed every time you get into the test. Every time student logs in, the 4-digit access code is needed. If the student has paused, he needs the proctor pin to get back in. Okay. Sorry. So I know the boxes look very similar. That's why we have reminded you and shown you this information so as to not confuse you when testing actually happens. Again, this is the same slide as before to remind you, and this will be the 4th time we talk about the proctor pin, so you don't forget. Okay, the help tab. The help tab is always available in admin. It has downloads, links to all the manuals. It has our contact information. You can call us at any time, send us an email at any time. You can chat with us. You can chat, and the chat function works marvelously when you have internet, okay? You cannot use chat if your internet is down because it needs the internet. So you can't chat to us or attempt to chat with us to tell us that your internet is down. So call us, or, well, you're going to have to call us basically at that point, right? Okay. With that, I'm going to turn it back to Heather to go through some last few slides before we close up today. Heather, are you ready?
I'm standing by, Helene. Here I am.
Oh,
ready. Right. Great job, Helene. So, all right, folks. So, as a reminder, chat us questions on the upper right. Click on questions if you need to ask us anything. We're rounding out the hour. We're getting close to 3 o'clock. Real quickly, we just want to make sure that all of our computer-based testing schools know that keyboarding skills have always been part of the New York State Learning Standards. We do have specific guidance per grade level. What does it mean to be proficient with keyboarding? Okay, next slide. Additionally, we have instructional tools. So this is a great feature if you want your students to maybe use the empty equation editor boxes. What you see here on screen, these are empty equation editor boxes where students can actually type an essay in the CR box or use the math equation editor and drawing tool as part of daily instruction. These are available in the question sampler. The question sampler is publicly available. Helene's noted that, but the question sampler is also something that you can share with your parents. So please do check this out. You can find articles about how to navigate to the empty equation editors, the instructional tools on CBT support. Okay, if you search on the word empty, you're going to find the articles about the equation editors. Okay, or I'm sorry, the CR boxes. So now for those new schools, we'd like to share about the command center model. This is something that districts throughout New York State They developed the first year of operational CBT in 2017, and then they shared it with us as a great way to administer CBT. We want you to think about the fact that you're now testing in a virtual space. We've moved beyond brick and mortar walls. You don't need to test your students according to your instructional classes. You certainly can, but you don't need to. In the command center model, it has where, say, you've got the principal is in one room with the school test coordinator, and they're watching Nextera admin, okay? And then you might have technical coordinators in the hallways that are waiting outside the classrooms or the testing locations, like you might be testing in the cafeteria or the gym. And they're on hand with additional computers, extra mice, anything that they may need to provide technical support on the fly for those proctors who are actively in the classroom. The proctors, the teachers, they may not have teacher accounts in Nextera admin. Maybe the principal has the dual role of teacher and he's the one who can see the classes in Nextera admin. And instead, the proctors are actively helping those students in the classroom. They're not worried about, logging into Nextera admin, losing their password, timing out Nextera admin and having to log in again. So this is just one option, and we want you to think about it. And if you want more details about the command center model, you can absolutely send us an email at cbtsupport@niced.gov, or better yet, ask your neighboring districts. Ask those districts that have done computer-based testing for 2 or this is their 3rd year. They may have great tips for you. Next slide. Student login tickets. So here you see some of my art. So these student login tickets, this is another thing that districts have shared with us. They print the student login tickets from Nextera admin, but then they print them on either labels and put them on index cards, or they tape or glue them to the index cards. The important thing that we want to make sure that you know is that we think it's important that your students note the computer name of the computer that they're testing on. And here you can see I've created this index card with the username and password and added a computer name line. For the simulation, we added a computer name line to those phony student login tickets. But for operational CBT, there is no line for computer name, so you may want to note it. And then also another tip that we've heard from districts throughout the state is that they have students who may be not testing that day, yet they were sitting in for the proctor, the teacher's directions, to turn over that login ticket, write the reason why they might not be testing, and maybe the student is going somewhere else. They're not in the classroom. Only in the classroom you have those students who are focused on taking the computer-based test. Next slide. All right, so tech tips. These are so important, and you will hear about them again on March 15th in the Proctor webinar. The Proctor Training and Best Practices webinar will go over all these things. For those operational schools, we're going to launch the listserv first, where we're going to be sending you information, reminders. You must do these things. You must disable screensavers. We saw it this Tuesday during the CBT simulation that students with screensavers were getting booted out of the computer-based test. If the secure browser, if it identifies anything else that's happening on the student's computer, like a notification for email or a low battery notification, those students will be booted out of the test, and then the proctor will have to assist them with getting back into the test. Okay? Double check wireless connections. If you've got a room of, say, 30 students, and maybe and you're trying to use the secure browser practice test in a dry run before the day of operational, and you notice that all 30 of those students can't log in, they can't download the test at the same time, maybe only 15, half the class can. Let's take a look at those at your wireless connection. Let's also think about changing the batteries, right? So these are real experiences that we've had schools tell us about each year. Limit network activity like streaming videos. Make sure the science lab isn't watching videos about frogs and grasshoppers during computer-based testing. Save your network for those students. Charge testing devices. Oh my gosh, If you've got a one-to-one device situation, please remind those babies to charge the computers before they come to school to take the computer-based test. Every year, we have students that hit the ground running with 5% battery, and the secure browser just keeps popping them out of the test when that battery notification comes up. Therefore, have extra cords and power strips on hand. Maybe your technical coordinator in the hallway has those things if the proctor needs them. Extra devices, we recommend maybe 3 to 5. It's not necessary, but it's a good practice. And then finally, try to reboot all devices before the day of an operational CBT administration. We understand sometimes that can be a headache, but some computers, when they're left on for a really long time, they get grumpy. We don't want grumpy computers. So just keep this in mind. These are best practices that we have developed based on feedback from our operational schools throughout the state. Next slide. Next slide, please. Okay, next slide. All right, upcoming training. We still have March 20th on that proctor webinar there. Ignore that. It's the 15th, and that registration is already posted. My apologies. Okay, so you guys are in the statewide webinar. Score point comes next. Then the proctor webinar is on March 20th. I'm sorry, March 15th, and then after the CBT administration, we hold a lessons learned, because every year during operational CBT, we learn something new. Okay, and next slide. Remember to sign up to the listserv. Oh my gosh, if you like hearing our voices here today, you like seeing these slides, we promise we'll give you much more. We'll give you words to read. Every week, we send information out about CBT to the CBT listserv. So sign up today. It's a great read. It's the best way to start your day. So opening a CBT listserv email. Now, Helene, we do have a couple minutes. We could possibly take some questions. If anybody has a burning question, you can hold up your hand. We could hear from you directly. We don't have much time, but maybe we could take 5 minutes. Of course, you don't need to stay. But if you have a burning question, we can try and answer it. Helene, do you see anybody out there who wants to speak directly to us today?
Heather, why don't you talk about fast track NISIS IDs for a second?
Oh, sure. So that's a great question, Clara. So for those schools, you know that NISIS ID is how your students are accessing the test. But what if you get a student who lands in your district 3 days before operational ELA, and maybe they can't get a NISIS ID actually created that quickly, because all of our students in New York State, they're born with the NISIS ID. They're stamped right there on their foot the moment they're born. That's literally not true, but they do have a NISIS ID when they're enrolled in a New York State school. If they're coming from another state and the school deems that that student has enough understanding of CBT, maybe they come from a state where they're already doing computer-based testing, they want that student to take the computer-based test, the district data coordinators typically have access to the NISIS ID app. During operational CBT, we open up a fast track NISIS ID app where one can be created a temporary ID on the fly to enter the student into Nextera admin to be able to print a student login ticket for that student. Okay? So we have solutions. If you have problems, we've got answers, most likely. Anything else? Helene, do you see anything out there?
It looks like Heather Brotherton has a question. So,
she has the best name. Yep.
It's Helen.
Hello, Heather. Can you hear us?
It's Helen. Helen,
it's Helen. That's okay. Helen? No? Oh, no questions. That's okay. That's okay. Great.
Okay.
That's it. Okay, guys. Well, hey, CBT support. If you have any questions, send us your feedback, send us your feelings, send us your questions. But also, if you need assistance installing the Questar secure browser, maybe you want to participate on March 5th and you haven't done that yet, please contact Questar.
Helene,
Blackstar will help you.
could you put up the listserv slide
Oh,
one more time, please?
Sure. The most exciting listserv, I think, in the whole state. Isn't that right, Clara?
I believe it is.
Yeah. See? Yep. Yep. There we go. Guys, thank you so much for participating, and let us know what you need. We're standing by. Thanks, Helene.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good day.